The Stuart Collection started in 1981 thanks to the patron James Stuart da Silva. We commission sculpture for the campus, and we invite artists to come to the campus to look around, to think about sites, to think about the campus as a whole, and to think about something that they might do to enhance the campus. Once we have a proposal and a ballpark budget, we take these to our very distinguished art advisory board, which is composed of art professionals from around the country. We gather them together whenever we have enough proposals, and they review the proposals for artistic merit. Then we take the proposals through a university review process, and obviously the chancellor has the last say. We've never been turned down by the chancellors, the 3 chancellors that have been here, so we feel that we are well supported by the university. Tim Hawkinson's Bear is the 16th project for the campus at UCSD. We chose Tim because we had been watching his work for a while and found that he was one of the most inventive artists we'd seen in a long time. We had no idea what he would come up with, but we decided that we invited him to come to the campus and walk around with us and think about what he might do. Tim uses things that he finds right around him. He's used his own body, he's used his fingernail clippings to make a very small bird with super glue. He has made things from chairs. He uses non-traditional materials, things he finds that inspire him. In our case, he was thinking about rocks.
We were going out to Arizona often to visit Patty's family, and so seeing these enormous boulders that were weathered and rounded corners, they started suggesting these kind of stuffed animal shapes to me, and I guess that's the way I get a number of my ideas, just through visual information.
Just looking around, and
getting stuck in traffic, or misreading a visual event, and kind of the misinterpretation becomes more of a more interesting kind of idea than the actual event.
So when you looked around, were you thinking, well, I wonder where I could do this idea, or were you thinking, oh gosh, I wonder what kinds of ideas might spring from just looking around with a completely open mind?
I guess it was, I mean, everything I was coming up with was more or less on the monolithic kind of side of things. And there are a number of other rock pieces in the collection. And I thought this idea really resonated nicely with that. And then when the engineering, when they started building the Jacobs, what do you call it?
Well, that portion of the Jacobs School, it's currently called the Academic Court, and it's surrounded by 3 new buildings, only one of which was, well, even that building was barely coming out of the ground, I think, when we looked at that space.
Right, but it seemed like that area would be an ideal situation for this more kind of organic object to play off of these modern buildings.
These very modern buildings. It just seemed like a tremendously good idea to me. I really liked it.
Well, I needed to hear that because I hadn't talked about the idea to many people, and I wasn't really sure, just how it would read, because it sounds a little silly. And
that didn't sound silly to me. It sounded.
But it had giant eye hooks in it at the time, and that was really what was holding the whole thing together.
And I don't even know if you had your original model that you created, your sort of conceptual model at that time.
No, I hadn't.
I made that just,
yeah, once we started getting serious about things, I went out and, I think the first thing I did was just gathered some small granite rocks from our backyard and stacked them up into a bear. And, but in my first vision of this, it was still this floppy, this 200-ton floppy stone bear, floppy given that it was held together by these eye hooks. And I think then when we started researching and thinking seriously about it, you realized that it was going to have to be pinned together as well as...
yeah, the idea of just holding these rocks together with eyes might have been, structurally possible. In other words, you could dangle the arm rock, say, from the body rock with a giant steel eye, but if it were to start shaking around in an earthquake, it really wouldn't be possible. It really wouldn't be a good idea to have these sort of arms rubbing and bouncing around. So, and I remember the book that you sent that described your idea, and this little potato man, sort of brown, homely little thing that you had put together out of plaster, right? And that was what we showed to the Stuart Collection Advisory Committee, and they were really supportive. And the consensus that came from them and all of us, I think, was that it should be as big as it could possibly be. That the bigger, the better.
Yeah, I think in the proposal, the first drawing showed it maybe like a 10 or 12 foot high bear, and then there was the intermediate, the mama bear, which was maybe 18 feet, and then the last bear, which I didn't really think was possible, was probably 20 or 30 feet, and it had a mountain climber on it.
You had superimposed a mountain climber sort of halfway up it, and that was probably even a bigger bear than we ended up.
I think so.
Ended up with.
That would have been.
We ended up with a very big one. We ended up with one that was actually bigger than we thought. I think 18 feet was what we thought would be the height we were sort of aiming at, and
which would have been great. But we ended up with 23 feet.
23
much better.
Feet. Yeah.
So after the presentation of the idea and getting the first green light on that, we needed to find some rocks.
Yes. We went to places where there are rocks that, seemingly are strewn everywhere, and it should be easy to find just the right rock, and it turned out to be quite difficult. And there was a young guy who was a graduate student at San Diego State, actually, and he spent the better part of a year, I think, driving around on weekends looking for rocks, and we sent you photographs of rocks, and you came down a couple of times and looked at some, and of course the big rock was the key, the big sort of 100-ton
that
object.
Determined the size of all the other rocks.
It determined the size of all the other rocks, and it was determined by the realities of what we could kind of haul around.
And we were looking for a rock that was above ground. We didn't want to have to dig up a giant rock and have a big ugly side on it.
Exactly, or have some misshapen thing. So it had to be sort of sitting on top of the ground so you could really see the whole thing. It had to be somewhat in the shape of an oval rock, and it had to be accessible. It had to be near a road, or it had to be in some way, something you could pick up, because the type of equipment that's required is enormous, and if you don't have it near a road, you have to build a road to it. So
you want to think responsibly when you move a 100-ton boulder. So what you found
the place we found
really
was ideal, because it was a giant producing sand and gravel operation, and
the rocks had already been
the land had already
around.
been scarred, and they had some large rocks that were there that were actually too large for them, or impractical for them, to break up and turn into this gravel product. And so we claimed one, or we found a couple of them.
There were a couple, and we kept going back to this one squat, very kind of turtle-shaped rock.
Yes, kind of flat, which was ideal in a way, because had it been rounded, it would have been 200 tons.
It would have been much heavier. This presents a nice full bear, and then it's a little lighter weight, easier to work with. And
yeah, from the side it's kind of pancaked, and but from the front it's this huge round thing. And then we got together there and sort of went walking around this place looking for other rocks, arm rocks and leg rocks and ear rocks.
Which we estimated, just given the size of the torso rock, to be, you know, maybe 10 feet for the limbs, and
yes,
6 to 8 feet for the head.
Yes.
After picking the rocks, I mean, if we're going chronologically,
yes,
we moved them to Camp Elliott,
to this facility that belongs to UCSD, a tract of land at about 10 miles from the campus, which was an ideal staging area.
We needed to isolate them and have a place to scan them.
Right. We set them down on props, on railroad ties, and then got someone who actually you've worked with before, Ron McPherson, to come and scan them with a special device, a laser scanning device. He scanned every stone.
I guess he had to put up a tent around each stone to isolate.
Yes, he had a lot of trouble doing it, but he did it. And we ended up there with electronic files of every rock, basically a three-dimensional electronic image of each rock, which was then given to someone at the Mike Bailey, who at the time was at the supercomputer facility and had a lab that was part of the visualization lab there, that had the ability with these machines of his, these LOM machines or prototyping machines, had the ability of taking these three-dimensional electronic files, electronic images, and printing them out and turning them into objects, so that we ended up with, there are 8 rocks in the bear, but we ended up with something like 16 different model rocks. One large one, which was at 3/4 of an inch to a foot, about this big, and then all the others. And you got those in a package, right? And so you got to play with them and put them together in your studio.
So I took the models of the rocks and had about a day and a half to put them together.
Very little time, because we had an event that,
and we wanted to have this model there. We had a celebration of the rocks.
Was that good to have very little time?
I think it was, yeah, I could have spent days and days kind of milling it over and trying different combinations, but I think I kept going back to the...
You came down with the thing put together, and then you actually changed it.
Yeah, I did. I changed. I think I was using a different rock for the head of for that event, and then I went back and...
Is that what it's about? The way it's put together? Or is it, you know, how did that work for you? Because all of the work you've done, at least that I know of, has involved just a complete hands-on immersion in terms of your own making of it. So what was this like for you, dealing with these massive objects and dealing with this thing in a way that you couldn't obviously manipulate any of these things yourself?
Well, it really wasn't that different. It was just I had a much briefer kind of time to really participate in it. I mean, or abbreviate it, but it was I kind of had the same amount of control, really, in that I was using these found rocks. I didn't want to touch them at all. I didn't want to alter them, and so that meant hands off for anybody that came into proximity with them. The rigging companies and drilling, and so the you and then all the technicians and people that were involved in it were really kind of extensions of what I wanted to do, and so it was really just an extended tool, kind of.
And it didn't feel that novel. It didn't feel that different to you, to be working that way as opposed to the way you worked? Yeah,
certainly more. There was the distance, but you kept me involved and up to speed on everything. So I felt like I was in total control of everything that I wanted to be in control, everything that I thought was
through the
important.
use of this model. You obviously, I mean, you know, as far as the putting together of it, it was put together exactly the way you wanted it to be put together, and it was, you know, that was something you did have total control over.
And then when we came to the point of actually putting the rocks together, I was there. Well, I wasn't there for the legs. Those were put in position before.
Right.
I mean,
well, and there wasn't a whole lot of adjustment possible, except for perhaps the angle of the head, and actually the placement of the arms. There was adjustment possible there.
So I was there for that, and for the head, which was critical. And we did end up changing the angle of the head a little bit to give it just a little more animation.
Yeah.
And
there's something else about it, I think, that's that's kind of key. That even though the idea is very simple, and the idea is something that you can almost sort of tell somebody about, and they can go ahead and do it, they can't go ahead and do it because the rocks are so unique, right? The rocks, and I think you said this at one point, you, in looking for a rock to make a teddy bear, are looking for a rock that is a certain kind of oval shape, and no rock is going to tend to be that perfect oval shape. And I think you said at one point, well, this is probably what is going to make this interesting, what's going to make it good is the ways in which these rocks are sort of disobeying this desire to be, you know, nice ovals.
Yeah, that's
so there's an arm that's too long and too square, and there's, you know, they're all kind of wrong in some way, but that's what really gives it character. Right?
Exactly.
And that's what you're able to exploit when you're putting it together. So you could take this thing and put it together, you know, a dozen times. We hope you don't, but you could take this idea and do it 1,000 times, and it would be, each time it would be different, right? Because of the nature of these rocks, because of the natural, because it's nature or chance or something like that.
It's it's in the rocks.
Actually, the hardest part was not so much the engineering, which is really fairly straightforward. It's just rocks and pins, and the pins have to be the right size, and the rocks have to be reinforced in certain places. But the, you know, making it possible to actually erect this thing and put it together was really key, and I think that's where the contractors were really important and just incredibly important. Their willingness to sort of work with this totally unique situation. So these guys from Pacific Southwest Structures, and this guy in particular, Bob Conway, and his boss, John Shelby, their willingness to get into this and to deal with it, and their excitement about it.
Well, it was such
really
an
wonderful.
unusual thing for them to be working on. Do you think that kind of lent to their enthusiasm?
I think so. I think so.
It's not often that they build a
get to do something like this. And I think they got a tremendous, especially Bob, who was really the hands-on foreman for the thing, got great satisfaction from it, a great sense of pride out of doing it. And
well, they were great to work with, and really responsive to my suggestions.
What we're going to do is we're going to set the rock up in place. We're going to set it with the come-alongs. We're going to turn it until you like it, ultimately like it.
And we figured out a way for this sort of big anchor plate, and way for that to sort of, so you could pick up this rock and basically put it in place and bolt it down, and not worry about huge cranes standing there, and whether things were going to fit, and there was some adjustment built into it.
It really went together quite smoothly for the size and weight.
Yes. And it was very exciting to see it go up, because it was, you know, even though there's models and all this, you know, envisioning of it, seeing the thing was, I think, really exciting for everybody, seeing the this big thing be erected.
And also, there was some excitement in moving the rocks. I remember hearing, moving the big torso boulder. Didn't you have to close roads down? And
yes, and lots of police cars, and this vehicle with many wheels, and lots of orchestration went into that. What was that like for you?
Well, I found out about it kind of after the fact.
I remember you seemed a little shocked when the whole thing was happening. You were just kind of seemed to be like, my God, how did I get myself into this?
No, I just couldn't believe it was actually happening. I mean, after 5 years, it was really satisfying to see the rocks go up. And I guess until we actually saw the torso rock up in the air, you know, we never really got a clear image of it from up above. And so,
from up above, like in the buildings,
right? Well, no, from before we photographed it, and I guess the scans helped us get an idea of what it would look like. But until it's actually gone vertical, you don't know. Yeah, there were angles that we hadn't been able to see before.
Right. Well, and the scale of it, just the scale, you know, what it looks like when you're standing on the ground, and what it looks like in the context of the buildings. And
that's something you can't convey just through the idea.
Right. And so when it was first set up, it was just in a kind of dirt area. And since then, and actually for the next few months, the place is going to get lawns, and it's gotten pathways, and it's gotten all finished out, and trees. And how was that evolution of it? How do you see it now in a kind of finished space? Did that change it for you?
Well, I think the trees particularly changed it. They have a strange effect on the reading of the scale, because you generally know the size of these trees, and then they have kind of to me, a surreal effect on the scale of the bear. It's almost like you're looking at an HO train model set or something.
Because the trees are miniaturized in the presence of the bear?
They seem to be, I guess. I don't know if it had that effect on you when the trees first.
Yeah, I found the trees a bit disconcerting at first, and I'm not sure why. I found that the whole, you know, finishing out of the space, I liked it a lot in the dirt, just sitting there, because it was so blunt and
that's how we were used to seeing these rocks in the dirt.
Yeah, and there's another thing. I guess I don't want to over-examine every aspect of it, but there were pins sticking out. There were tons of pins that were embedded in this in order to not just hold the thing together, but in order to pick it up, and in order to chain the arms up and bracket and shore everything into place. And these pins were left sort of sticking out, and then they were cut off. And at one point, I think you wanted them, you know, patched in a certain way. And
I thought I wanted to just reveal every step of the process, because I do that in a lot of my work, just allowing the process to be very clear in these things that I make. And so I thought we would just go ahead and patch the pins with a kind of gray concrete patch or whatever. It was kind of generic to the media, the material. And
so that the patches would be sort of honest
visible,
patches.
and whatever marks we made, spray painted onto the rocks, would be left. And then it became really kind of distracting. And at one of the events that we had, when the bear was still kind of spotted with these patches, people were asking, you know, what are the spots? And so it was clear that rather than revealing the process, they were kind of a stumbling block, and something that
it looked that way to you as well as this was confirmed by other people's questions about it.
So so we went back and redid the patches
to patch them and
conceal them.
Conceal them pretty well. If you really look for them, you can find them.
And now you can still find the pins at certain angles, and I think that's kind of reassuring to see these 6-inch steel pins holding it all together, and then it's not just
And that's, I think, an important thing for people to know, that you intended for these pins to be visible, the pins that are holding the arms to the body.
Definitely.
so that it looks like a kind of straightforward engineering project as opposed to something that's been completely sort of made to look, you know, where the pins are completely hidden and concealed.
Right. We had the option of grinding stone down to get them to meet up, and we would be able to conceal the pins completely, but I didn't want to do that. I guess I thought it was important to just keep the stones as they were as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So has this piece informed your work in some way, informed what you're doing now, or in the future, or in terms of doing things in the outdoors or in public? Is that something you feel you're going to do more of, or?
Yeah, I'm sure it'll lead to other projects. Whenever I'm involved in something like this, I start reading. Well, now I'm seeing bears everywhere, you know, in stacks of bags of flour, you know, whatever. I guess I'm being drawn to these kind of primitive gatherings of clumpy shapes, and so I'm thinking about yeah, other images that can be drawn out of.
Where there would be an image that just like the bear, as opposed to some kind of amorphous or organic or cell-like object that wouldn't be immediately recognizable.
For me, I'm more comfortable pinning it onto something that resonates with something recognizable. I've been thinking about fertility goddesses and
like Venus of Willendorf.
Yeah. I mean, you can see how that form is broken down into.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for talking to us.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks to the Stuart Collection. And
thanks for doing this piece. We got you at just the right moment, I think.
This granite bear turned out to look rather like a teddy bear, which is a familiar thing to all of us. And a teddy bear is cozy. A teddy bear is about security in a way, in these very security conscious times. A teddy bear is about growing up in a way. So it seems that it takes on a lot of other meanings. It's something that everybody can recognize and see, and yet when you see it for real, it is almost a little bit scary. So it's because it's so big and so heavy, obviously, but I think it's a very playful object, and children respond as well as adults. It's something that's accessible for everybody, and I think it just works on a lot of levels.